Welcome everybody. I'm Julia Parrish. I'm the Associate Dean for College of the Environment. This is the time that we had reserved for the open Zoom with postdocs, and what we decided to do was just move it directly into the first panel that we've been talking with you all postdocs about, and that is to bring together some faculty who have direct experience with online hiring. So one thing that I can tell you straight out is that we didn't find departments that have engaged in fully online hires. And that's because, as you postdocs well know, there's a season to hiring. And when we started the beginning of last season's hiring, that was pre-COVID-19. So those units that had hires that moved into spring quarter mopped up a little of their hires with move to online. Atmospheric Sciences, which is the unit that Rob Wood is joining us from, is such an example. However, there have been units that have done at least part of their hiring via online for a while. And so we have Sarah Converse, who joins us from the School of Environmental and Forest Sciences and the School of Aquatic and Fishery Sciences. She's everywhere all at the same time. She's also the co-op unit leader. Tim Essington, who is joining us from the School of Aquatic and Fishery Sciences, and he also is the director of the Center for Quantitative Science, CQS, which runs the QUIRM graduate program and the QSci undergraduate courses. And Jennifer Ruesink, who is a professor in the biology department in Arts and Sciences. Biology is another unit that has engaged in online partial hires for a while now, and Jen actually was a search leader for such a hire this past year. So Jane, I'm gonna let you just go through the technical details of what we should do where, as it were, so that I don't screw up.
So participants should have options on the bottom of their screen, Q&A, and that's where the questions will be answered. So panelists can either answer them via text or talk. And the chat is available for any sort of technical questions. So please post your questions in the Q&A portion.
That'd be great. And postdocs, if you would rather speak your question out loud, that's fine. You can raise your hand and I will just patrol the list of attendees so that I can unmute you so that you can talk. Completely fine if you would rather talk than type. Also completely fine if you'd rather type, because that way we can get a list of the questions. All right. Okay, I have given the very briefest of introductions to the panelists, but I'm going to ask each of them to just spend a few moments talking in a bit more detail about who they are and what they do. And Rob, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Rob Wood. I'm a professor in the Department of Atmospheric Sciences in the college, and also serving as the Associate Dean for Research for the college. So I look after research activity at college and ways in which we can work together across units, etc., to find funding, etc., like that. Work on grants, etc., proposals. I could talk about, we only had we started our hiring process this year kind of early for a faculty member. And we did most of the interviews in winter quarter before we got to this COVID situation, and so we did have one candidate who expressed an interest in doing a remote participation in the hiring process because at that point it was right towards the end of the winter quarter, and so COVID was emerging as an issue, and other countries we could well have gone into lockdown before we did, and so the writing was on the wall at that point. So one interviewee actually asked us if she could participate remotely, and we were more than happy to engage in that. It was a bit of a flurry of, oh, how on earth do we do this? Many of us had use of Zoom before, but I'd used it for meetings. But at that point, teaching was it was a new thing for teaching. Some people have already used it, but the idea that we would all be using Zoom was a new thing. So we got together as a faculty, and we kind of decided that if we could make this as close, we sort of had to, because we weren't starting from scratch. We have to try and make it equitable among the different candidates. How do we make it recreate as closely as possible what we already had done for the other candidates?
Okay, so don't let that secret out of the bag just yet. Hold on.
Okay.
Let's let the other panelists.
Okay, all right. Yeah,
and then we'll kind of structure those questions. Thanks. Jen, Ruesink.
Great. I have a coincident violin lesson going on as I'm working remotely close to my field site, and so I'm just warning you. So I led the biology search for a new faculty member, assistant professor in natural history and conservation last fall. Sarah Converse was also on that committee, and we used Zoom specifically to take our candidate pool from 16 highly qualified candidates to five, I think five that we actually brought on campus. And so there are lessons that we learned during those structured Zoom interviews. And biology had actually done these structured Zoom interviews as a sort of pre-evaluation to get good candidates to come to campus, particularly good candidates in person as well as on paper to come to campus. So we drew on a lot of experience that the department had developed over about 3 years of using these structured interviews. But those structured interviews lasted 20 minutes with each candidate and clearly are just a small fraction of what would be involved in a fully remote interview process. Does that help? Is that where you want me to get to, roughly?
Thanks, Jen. That was perfect. Tim, Essington.
Hi, everyone. I think my experience is pretty similar to Jen's. In fact, I think I've been on also some search committees with Jen where we've done Zoom-like interviews, but usually and sort of that screening of we've gotten all the paper applications. We see a big group of people. We're having trouble sussing out who are the best candidates to bring in for an insight visit. And we've, I think I've been on at least 3 and perhaps 4 search committees then that have done a full round of screening to try to get from that 16 or 10 or whatever down to the 3 to 5. And definitely learned some lessons of, you get some surprises sometimes both ways. Yeah, definitely have experience, trying to do the evaluation when it's remote.
Great, thanks, Tim. And finally, Sarah Converse.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Sarah Converse, and I've been here for about 3 years as a faculty member. Before that, I spent about 10 years at a federal research center. And in my time here, I've chaired 1 search committee and served on 2 others, including the one that Jen mentioned. And in all of those, we had that sort of preliminary process where we were screening down to 3, 4, 5 people to bring on campus. And I actually went through that myself when I interviewed for this position. interestingly, at 5 a.m. from Tasmania, I interviewed for this position. So I'm happy to talk about it. I think that it is important for all of us to recognize that we're all kind of in uncharted waters here. There are just a few examples, I think, of positions really anywhere in the country where people really have done this. So happy to think along with you, but I think it's probably good for everyone to recognize up front that we're a little bit in uncharted waters here.
Great, thank you. So Postdocs, I know that you probably have a whole raft of questions. I'm going to just start our panelists talking a little bit, so giving their own thoughts about a few questions that I grabbed from the last Zoom conversation that we had. But please don't be shy about layering in to any answer with more specificity. And also I'm going to just watch the clock so that I make sure that we retain lots of time for individual postdoc questions. So panelists, when I spoke with postdocs last time, and we were really talking about this new era of hiring and COVID-19, I would say that there were two directions of concern that folks were talking about, thinking about. And one was the whole, how do I do the online thing? And I actually want to push that out a bit, because the other one was, how do I, in putting together an application for a job, right? Our expectation across the country is that jobs in academics, not necessarily in all branches of research, that is, in the federal government, there may be an equal number and even more jobs. We'll have to wait and see. But in academics specifically, there's a general expectation of fewer jobs and thus more competition. At the same time, that postdocs across the country, and certainly here at the University of Washington, are experiencing small to grave shifts in how they have been able to conduct their scholarly work as a consequence of COVID-19, of the university's restricted operations, and having to shift to other parts of their work, perhaps computational, perhaps writing, maybe having to give up a summer field season, a cruise, some particular lab experiment that couldn't be finished. So there's a lot of question about how do you present your CV? Do you highlight a pause or a gap due to COVID-19? Do you hide it? What do you do? So as 4 faculty members who are well seasoned in being on search committees, in participating in searches, in looking at the CVs of prospective candidates, what would your advice be to our postdocs on that question of how do you present a gap, a pause, a shift in your production on your CV? And I'll just open it up to any of you who want to leap in and take a stab at that. Tim.
Sure. I mean, I guess not having seen this, but I think the CVs and cover letters and research statements that really that would end up shining would be the ones that illustrated the way in which you adapted to this. So I think a statement that said, "Hey, I was going to do all this, but it got canceled, so now there's nothing," would not be as compelling as facing this barrier. This is how I responded, and was able to do this instead. So I think showing that adaptability, I think, is really important.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Sarah.
I just wanted to say that Tim said exactly what I was going to say. I think that's a really important, mind meld. I think that's a really important point. That's exactly, I think, from my point of view, the way to do this is to talk about it from the standpoint of how did I adapt. That's what faculties are looking for. How do you deal with trouble and difficulties? Because this is a big one, but obviously we all face various different things in our career, and it's all about how do you deal with it, how do you roll with it.
Okay, so that, Sarah, you've just brought up something which I think is a really important extension, which is, although this is a worldwide pandemic, it is not the only time in a career, especially if somebody who is at an early stage, that they're going to come across an impediment and have to be adaptable and deal with it and talk about how they did that. So the reason to highlight how you are adaptable to this situation, other than obviously explaining it, is you're going to have to do that again, and perhaps multiple times in your career. Great. Jen, I know that you had something you wanted to say.
Just a slightly different spin on that. I think that search committees will get tired of reading 100 or 300 cover letters that say, here's how I adapted to COVID-19, although I think it's important. But I do feel like those sorts of being able to say or demonstrate, not tell, but show in one's materials how you are going to perform, not in the post-COVID-19 era, because I don't really think that we're going to get to that anytime soon, but actually how this time has led to, how this time has actually shifted the sorts of ways that one communicates and teaches and does research. So without sort of saying, here's how I responded to COVID-19, I think it is certainly the case that search committees will be looking for people who were adaptable to the situation and are prepared to do excellent research and teaching in slightly new ways, because we will have to do that.
Great. Rob, do you want to add something in?
I don't have a lot to add to that, but I because I think that illustrates nicely the ways in which you can sort of show that you're adaptable. I think it would be good, to be able to if there's something that's anything you've done, even if it's a remote presentation at a remote conference that perhaps you weren't going to do, and as an opportunity came up to do something, because I know that many, for example, we have a meeting, we had one last week that only normally 30 people show up to, but we had 150 participants because there was a lot more interest in doing it online. If there's a way to illustrate that you've been able to reach out more in that way and give presentations that perhaps you weren't even able to give before, and I know another way, proactively, is that our seminar series are very dry this quarter. We have openings. I would love it if a postdoc came to me and said, oh, do you mind if I give a presentation? I've got some material, and you may have an opening in one of your seminar series, right? So think about where there may be actual opportunities to do more, not do more, but to just present your work in a way that may not have been available before. There may be opportunities there.
Great, thanks. So I just want to summarize what I've heard, because you've touched on a lot of different places within an application. So what I've heard is definitely to talk about what you did do, and also what you will do going forward. And to do that both about your scholarly work, about your research, but also, I believe Jennifer brought up teaching. And certainly if you're being hired into a faculty position, like as not, you will have teaching responsibilities, as well as the chance to develop your own research lab. So really thinking about how you might adapt teaching in this new era would probably be a good thing as well. I heard the mention of cover letters, but also of research statements. And with respect to teaching, I would expect teaching statements as well. One last point I wanted to ask the panelists on this particular subject. Where do you think it's best to talk about what is happening with you, the postdoc, in this COVID era? Would you put it in the research statement? Would you place it in a cover letter? Would you sprinkle it everywhere? Do you think that one strategy is better than another?
I would say it really depends on how much COVID has impacted your research, teaching, or outreach activities, for example, as to where you put it. My inclination is the cover letter, unless it's probably had a cover letter, maybe the teaching statement, if you can illustrate, I've been thinking, maybe you haven't even done teaching, but you've been thinking about, you've been watching how other people have done teaching online, or you've been talking to faculty and other instructors about how they've done their teaching, build in some of those, the things that they say may have worked well into the teaching statement. I know there's a lot of proponents for doing more meetings online, conferences, scientific meetings online, and holding group meetings online, or doing, if there were ways to build it into those research and teaching statements, that would be great. But
great. Other folks, other panelists have a thought on that? Where to put?
I think this is a stab that I think I agree with Rob. Like, I don't think there's any set rule. I think between the cover letter and the research statement and the teaching statement, you are trying to tell the story of who you are, why you are, what you are doing, and where you're going. And it sort of depends on where you think that piece fits into your story. I think in the cover letter, probably you're just like doing the quick introduction. So it'd be kind of weird to mention that right away. It's sort of like if you just bumped into someone and when the first few things you said was, oh, COVID, it would be sort of odd. But, if it was, if you had a profound change in research that ended up being really fruitful and you wanted to highlight it, then maybe you have a brief reference to it in the cover letter. But I think those research statements are just telling your story.
Great.
So
Sure.
just a general comment about this. None of us know exactly how to do this. And so what I would say is, as a general statement, get your cover letter and research statement written with enough time that you really think you're going to have a number of people be able to look at it and give you feedback, and you're going to be able to integrate that feedback. This is definitely a time and a topic in which you're going to want to get feedback from a variety of people, and a variety of, maybe late, mid, early career faculty to look at that, who might have slightly different perspectives on this issue. So that feedback is more important probably now.
I just want to highlight that we've had a question on this theme that Jennifer has actually just typed an answer to. Thank you about that. Just asking making the point that some folks are having more trouble with adapting, and that's simply because the amount of responsibility that they have in a work-life balance has manifestly shifted. Sometimes to children, sometimes to more elderly or at-risk individuals within a family. I have to say, Postdocs, I was just in a meeting yesterday where a point was being made that some early social science work that's come out already about the effects of COVID-19 on academics has suggested a gender bias in publication rate towards male and away from female. And there's an open set of questions about why that is. and the degree to which that may follow caregiving. And so that's a research question within social science, which I am actually quite excited to find the answer to. So I await that work, but it does highlight, that work already does highlight that we might see these shifts. So Jennifer, if I can just ask you to unmute and say a few words along the lines of your answer, that'd be great.
Yeah, I just mentioned that a diversity and equity statement is a standard part of essentially all job application packages now. And that would be a really authentic place to say, here are the things that are in my personal experience. So diversity and equity statements often also include sort of the work that one is doing strategically to help others, but that personal experience component, I think, is clearly a way to demonstrate the sorts of experiential, there we go, there's the violin again, but I think you get where I'm going, that that would be another alternative, especially for people who are not able to say, here's necessarily how I have absolutely adapted and been as productive as before, but here are the things that I have really had to work through because of this challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And I think the reality of having less time to work is something that needs to be faced and needs to be said. And the ability to say there is a work-life balance in everyone's life, and sometimes that shifts. And to be able to say, this has shifted for me, this is what I'm doing, right? So perhaps in my less time at work, I have also made decisions about how I want to use that time in a different way than I would have if I'd had more time. And that, I think, is what the panelists are also referring to when they talk about adaptability, right? That ability to show that you are making wise and just and good decisions in your work-life balance, and as a consequence of a shift towards life, that you've also adjusted what you are doing in work. And so that can show a degree of maturity and strategy in how one approaches one's career that can be, I think, quite well received by search committees. So I think that's a good thing. We're at 12:30, and I want to shift to the other half of what Postdocs had expressed questions about, and that is, okay, so we all have gone through the training of how I give a presentation and how I make myself interesting and how I never apologize for my slides, and I make sure I'm speaking loudly and confidently, and suddenly I'm this 2D person. And so life is very, very different in terms of presentation. So I'm hoping that panelists can talk a little bit about how you would advise presenting yourself. And so here I'm thinking about you, the person, but you, the 2D space. And thinking in general about the degree to which the online environment might be different than the in-person environment in terms of that presentation. And so spoiler alert, then I want to go into a little bit of thinking about logistics, but right now I just want to think about presentation of self. And I'm going to start with Tim, since I know he thinks quite a lot about the theatrics of presentation. Tim, you might want to talk about your class so that people have a little situated context here.
Oh, sure. Yeah, a lot of folks might know I do both a grad and a staff faculty applied improvisation for scientists, which is you know, a lot about Julie just said of how to sort of be your authentic self and the most engaging. Usually, your most authentic self is usually your most engaging self. So it's sort of how do you get there and find communicate to other people from a place of joy and excitement and not dread. I guess maybe the things that I've been thinking about, and this is not directly answering Julia's question, is what I've seen, particularly like in our seminar series, is people are trying to replicate an in-person seminar online on Zoom.
Mhm.
So usually what happens is, you know, I'm going to share my screen, I'm going to have a PowerPoint, and I'm going to talk. And that's basically trying to emulate the in-person thing. And I would say, throw that out. You're not in person. So approach it from the perspective of you are sitting in front of a computer, and there are some things that you can do that you couldn't do before. So for instance, when you don't want people looking at a slide, make your screen share go away and make you the focus. Make yourself go away when you don't want to be the focus. I mean, there are things that you can do, live polls in the middle of a Zoom meeting that's very hard to do. So there are some opportunities, new things you can do, but of course you're missing up, and you're doing that because you're missing some of the face-to-face kind of stuff. The hardest thing, I think, you know, in real life is when we talk, we tend to communicate via movements, and that's very hard to do when you're this, you know, Hollywood Squares thing going on. But, you know, to the extent you can still gesture like a normal human being, making it look like it's a conversation is I think how to present yourself. In terms of what I've seen, in terms of most folks have tended to do these just sitting in their office and they're surrounded by stuff. I would just say the least distracting you can have in your background, the best. But apart from that, you know, I don't have any huge insights on how to make yourself look as sparkly as possible.
I like the sparkly bit.
There could be a filter for that on Zoom, add sparkles.
Yes, indeed. One little piece of logistical business there, I definitely find that you have to think a lot about whether and how you use your hands. I use my hands a lot when I talk. And so I think about that in the close space of this camera in front of me. And so if you're a hand talker like I am, you should also think about what your background is. Because if you're a hand talker and you have a green screen, what will happen is your hands will wink in and out of existence a lot. So much so that people will start very much focusing on watching you and they'll stop hearing you. So you have to be, you have to think about that. Similarly, you can do a green screen video now. We have a chair director of one of the units in the College of the Environment who had a video green screen that happened to be an underwater video he had shot of hammerhead sharks. And for almost the entire meeting, nobody actually paid attention to what was being said in the meeting at all, because we were all glued to his little cameo and watching the shark. Rob is laughing because I know he agrees with me. And so we all watched and we didn't listen. So think hard about the total presentation the visual presentation that you're making about yourself.
Well, another question came up about, and I don't know how this is going to work in academic hiring, but the chalk talks are becoming a more popular way of going about things. And I felt that several of the presenters in our search, they just kind of gave another PowerPoint presentation. And I thought that was a little bit disappointing. I mean, it was good in the sense that they were able to lay out their research, but it was essentially, and teaching. and it was essentially a research, and it became another research talk. But you know, I've been teaching, and I've been using an iPad to draw things write things in real time, and I'm managing to get through most of my lectures just sort of doing a similar thing to what I did on the board, which is write in real time and talk over it. There's some pretty good tools to be able to highlight things and have a pointer and, you know, to sketch things out. There was some pretty cool technologies there that you could use to help differentiate it from just being another PowerPoint presentation that I think I would encourage people to look at.
I think that's a fabulous, fabulous suggestion. And it strikes me, I know that our online teaching team, which is a group of faculty across the units in the College of the Environment, who are really pushing tools and technology and approaches in the online era, not just, as Tim says, taking your 45-minute talk and plastering it into the online environment. And Rob, your comment is making me think, I'm gonna ask them if they can put together a mini workshop on all of the different ways and technologies you can use to write the equations online or sketch things out so people can see what's going on, just so that everybody becomes more used to this. They give mini workshops that are half an hour long, and they are recorded so that they can go up and everybody can look at them. So Postdocs, I will let you know when that is happening, because that'll also be really advantageous in terms of, let's get this skill and then be able to use that in an environment where you're given a job talk, a chalk talk. Yeah. Sarah, I know you had something you wanted to say.
I have maybe 3 quick things related to Rob's point. Be ready to have that kind of tool available to you, not just when you're doing your chalk talk or your seminar, but if you're interviewing like this over the course of 2 days, a lot of the time is going to be sitting with other faculty members or graduate students or postdocs in the department talking about ideas. And at least for my work, I write a lot as I think, and okay, I have this problem. How would you approach this if we were going to collaborate on something? And I would benefit from being able to sketch and write. So think about having that kind of tool available all the time and be ready to jump to it. So that's one point. A second point goes back to the point about the background. If you are on campus, hopefully everyone would be smart enough not to ask you personal questions about your life. If you're in your home and there are toys in the background, you're giving that away. So think about the degree to which you want to reveal things about yourself via the background. And then third, we've probably all been in those situations with an interview or watching someone else interview where someone said something that was slightly awkward in some way. That's probably going to happen a little bit more on Zoom because everyone's a little bit more awkward. So I guess my general comment is be ready to try to roll a little bit with people being slightly more awkward than they might usually be. Try to be a little ready to, I don't know, gracefully smooth things over or move on or whatever in that setting, because I think a lot of people struggle to relate in this setting. So yeah.
Thanks. I am in that really interesting position of trying to listen, talk, and type all at the same time. And I know the panelists have been doing that too. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so again, I'm looking at time. I have 12:42, and I did want to pop to logistical issues. But before I do that, Postdoc, some of you have been typing in questions, and that's great. Please continue to do that. But I want to open it up to you and really make sure that we are covering the questions, the issues that you have concerns about. So without taking the conversation too much in any one direction, are there questions or issues that you have that you came to the panel to see covered and you haven't heard them being discussed yet? And please feel free to type in a question or raise a hand, which you can do in the participant box. Okay, and I'm, okay. So I'm just going to collect one of the latest questions. Did a video interview about 20 days ago and was told that they are, quote, figuring out how and when to set up in-person interviews or virtual in-person interviews. Do you have a sense of how it will look if I feel like I need to decline to go to an in-person interview across the country in the next few months? That's a great question, and it.
I would say decline. I would say what the people, these the shortlist are gonna influence what the panel does, what the group does, and if there's really it's probably best to just tell them that this should be doing it online, because there's many people may not feel that they want to speak up, but because it makes them look weak or compared to other candidates. But no, I think it would show a strength to just say, I don't feel that this is the right time to be doing this, and I'm happy to participate in an online interview, but I don't feel that. You can give a reason if you want, but I don't think you really need to, because how are they going to do these? Are they going to have 50 people in a room together? I just don't see it being realistic. So maybe speaking up and shaping the decision is the best thing. That's my own view. I don't know.
Great.
Julia, can I just follow up on that really quickly?
Please do. Please.
It's related to this, but on a smaller scale. If you are asked to do an online interview, what Rob's getting at is your own sort of comfort about, physical comfort and sort of, general comfort with what's happening. Think about that also for an online interview. This happens on campus interviews where you're scheduled to the point where you don't have 10 minutes to have a drink of water or something like that. I would say be assertive. If you see a schedule come in and there is no time for you to use the bathroom between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m., assert yourself and say, you know what, I think this is what I'm going to need in order for me to sort of be physically comfortable and well. I think that sometimes sort of the process of setting up interviews gets away from people and they might forget about those things. So assert yourself.
I think that's great. And so one way to do that, that maybe is not so scary in the moment, is to think about it in advance and to make a plan, right? And to write that plan down. Literally, if you wedding planned out what a day of an interview would look like online, where would you need breaks? And that might be a great thing to talk to your PI or other faculty mentors that you have right now, just about the shape of an in-person interview, if you haven't had one yet, so that you can really think about that. So when you're getting a schedule, as Sarah says, you can take a look at it and say, well, you know what, this doesn't actually really match the wedding plan I think I need, what I've made. And so that allows you to then assert yourself because you've thought about it in advance and you've checked things out. And so that might actually also be something, Anthony and Jane, that we want to think about doing and putting on the Postdoc resources page. as a general guideline, so we can work with faculty and postdocs and others to try and come up with what that might look like, and give you all some starting point frameworks and resources to use. Okay, I want to just summarize what I've heard. I've heard some really great thoughts from the panelists about not using the online environment to recreate the in-person environment, but to really grab the tools that you have and use them in new ways, in ways that you might not be able to in person. I really loved Rob's comment about, just get your iPad or your Surface Pro or your plug-in pad to your laptop to be able to do the Chalk Talk. And Tim's thought about, don't just do the 45-minute PowerPoint, right? Show some slides, stop sharing your screen so they can see you. You have that ability to go back and forth. That was fabulous. And really take full advantage of the medium. The thought about doing polls in your seminar, that's fantastic. I mean, think about getting people to listen if they knew they were being quizzed right in your seminar. It's sort of in your face, but why not? Why not do that? Also, it allows you to assess the room a little bit. That's great. So we had a question that actually came through in the chat. Has anyone evaluated a test lecture separate from a research presentation? So if you're asked to do to teach a class, which is a common thing in an interview, but now you're online. So any advice, and I know Jen was just typing some advice in, so Jen, maybe I'll ask you to say something and then we can ask others.
Julia, you've just been saying everything so much better, so I'm about to get back to you, but just to say, yeah, I think we really are in a new territory where sort of the ways that we evaluated people previously will have some changes because we're expecting that the academics and industry and agency scientists of the future are going to be working more effectively in a hybrid environment where there's some one-to-one, but much more that's going to be done virtually, both synchronously, that is talking with people as we are now, but also asynchronously. So I think there are a lot of opportunities. Us old dogs are really having to learn some new tricks, but I'm excited for what this is going to do in terms of the opportunities for building a scientific community that allows us to have really meaningful exchanges, more meaningful exchanges without always having to travel and be in the same place at the same time.
Great. Anybody else want to just comment on the teaching aspect and having to slot into a class? Thoughts on that?
I can just double down on what Jen said is, again, not approaching it as though you're standing in front of them lecturing, but you're not. You're on a computer screen, and they're on a computer screen. So approach it from that perspective. And we're all learning how to do that right now. So I don't think anyone's going to have the expectation that you are going to solve this, but definitely do your research, and just like you would for an in-person lecture. Look online, talk to colleagues, talk to your mentors, et cetera, of, what have they found to be effective online, what has not been effective, that kind of thing. So it all comes down to preparation.
Yes, as it does in life.
Can I just say one more thing there? Last fall, our IT specialist nicely prepared the people that we interviewed remotely with sort of the best practices of Zoom interviews. And those sorts of things were make sure that your face is lighted and that you have a pretty plain background without many distractions, and that you have a quiet space. And I've done 2 of the 3 for this. But I think that those best practices are really shaping up now, and it will be exciting to keep track of them. But I think that they're not the sort of things that we all have to invent independently. And it sounds like, Julia, you're also on it with trying to help the postdocs with some best practices about presentations, for instance, based on what the college is pulling together. So that's take advantage of that for sure.
Yeah. Hey, Jen, is that is that recorded, written down in any way, documented in best practices?
Yeah, Dave Hurley, our IT specialist, just sent them 2 links, and I can reconstruct those for you. But I mean, that was the Zoom interview of last fall, and I think the Zoom interview best practices will change. But yes, I'm happy to find those links.
Perfect. So we can collect that and put that in the resources for postdocs for the college, which is open, by the way. So anybody anywhere on campus can look at that. Sarah.
Julia, yeah, just one quick thing along the lines of these sort of best presentation. Actually, just this morning, I saw a piece in the Washington Post about how to upgrade and test and evaluate your Wi-Fi network at home and your modem at home. Mm-hmm. You might look at that. Obviously, the distraction of a bad connection is a distraction. So if there's some things that you can do at home to, you know, as much as you can to get that up to speed and performing the best, I think that's probably worth some of your time.
One thing that I found is a lot of people have they say their internet's bad, but it's often that it's the wireless that's bad, and it's the internet connection's fine. I mean, not always, but and so you can actually, many routers you can plug in Ethernet cable, and I tried that and it worked a lot better. It's much faster. Even though my internet's wireless, which I'm using now, is not that bad. It was much better, especially if you've got multiple users in your household, which you may well have. So you could look into that.
Okay, great.
There was a question about, oh, sorry, maybe you're going into it.
Go ahead.
And I don't know the answer, but I'm curious what people think. What about how close to the camera should you be looking at, and whether you should be looking up or down?
That is fabulous. I have to say that when I give Zoom seminars, I have a MacBook, and there's a little green dot right next to the camera, and I stare at that dot as if it's my best friend. And I'm having a conversation just with the green dot, just like I am right now. And what's weird is the edge of my vision, I see a little thing moving around. That's me, which I'm not looking directly at. I am now. And so I think it actually really helps in a 2D interview to look directly at the camera, so that people see you literally looking right out of their screen at them. And I would also say it's really important when you're having a one-on-many, you and the search committee, that you actually keep a gallery view on and look constantly at the body language of all of the folks on the committee. You want them ideally not to be doing email, to be paying attention, not to be frowning in that kind of, what did they just say? I don't understand that. And you'd like them to be smiling. So think of it slightly as a game with serious consequences. But you can get that sort of feedback, and you can actually stare directly at them and they won't know it. Something that you can't do in an in-person interview. So again, really thinking about the medium and how to use it can be really important. Okay, we are at 12:57. I just want to wrap up and say my list has that we're going to do a Surface Pro, iPad, how to use it, Chalk Talk mini workshop, that we're collecting the best practices of Dave Hurley's on Zoom presentations and may add to that. And I'm reminding all the postdocs that we already said we were going to do a Postdoc Ignite session in the college, probably sometime in May. So that's a fabulous chance for each and every one of you to package your best presentation self into 5 minutes. And we aim to have hundreds of attendees throughout the college at that session. So get ready. A great chance for you to use everything you've heard here and package it up in this great way. Panelists, in the moments that remain to us, any last words of wisdom that you would like to impart? Jen.
Very quick one, which you just said, again, the last thing that was my take-home message from doing Zoom interviews this fall, which was that those candidates who were able to package themselves and talk about their research in a compelling and non-jargon way in 5 minutes, because that's about what we gave them to tell us about what they thought was their best research accomplishment and where it was going. Those were the ones that really stood out to us at that moment of going from people who were really good on paper to the 5 that we wanted to spend more time talking with. And I have to say that that ability to say one story in 5 minutes, I still need to work a lot on, but I do feel like it is a powerful thing to have in your pocket for job interviews and life.
And life, yeah. Other panelists?
The only thing I came up, sorry, should have practiced my voice before I unmuted. Rob and Sarah kind of mentioned the sort of pushing back a little bit if you see something that looks, particularly challenging in what is being set up for you. And I think two related things is just know that on the other side, folks are making it up as they go. So I think they're generally going to be receptive to someone saying, hey, did you notice that such and such? But above and beyond that, I would say keep talking with whoever the search committee chair is. They always want everyone to be their best self. And you actually have a lot more power and control than you might otherwise think. And pointing out, and I know of a hire that happened on campus where, I think the search committee had a great idea and they sent it out, and independently, every single one of the candidates said, there's no way I can do that. And they ended up going, oh, yeah, and backtracking. I want to emphasize the advocate for yourself, because I think a lot of times you might be noticing something that everyone else is also noticing. And it's not necessarily something the search committee is that tied to. It's just maybe what they just thought of in the moment. And they may be grateful that you gave that suggestion.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we haven't figured out yet, many things we haven't figured out yet about doing online searches for faculty, I'm thinking specifically here, is how to recreate any of the informal parts of the meeting, the interviews, which lunches, drinks, dinner, those kind of things, which actually are pretty important, I think, and give the candidate a chance to evaluate the faculty as much as anything else. How are these people going to be fun to work with? And, could you, ask for if there are, maybe you could ask for whether there are opportunities to do that, and maybe just a happy hour at the end of the interview where the faculty or whatever groups they feel are appropriate for that to just get together. I mean, try and help, postdocs can really help us shape what we're going to do here, to follow on from what Tim said, just we need help figuring out the best way to do this. So.
Absolutely. that's a great final suggestion. So we are at 2 minutes after 1. We have just spent, amazingly enough, an hour talking about this. It flew by, I think. There were a lot of really good suggestions that we got from the panelists. Postdocs, I hope that this worked out for you, and what I would very much love, either in the Q&A or in the chat for those of you who remain, any specific thoughts for the College of the Environment Dean's Office about how this panel went for you would be great, because we want to make the next one better. And I remind you that we said that we were going to compose a second panel of folks who had experience hiring in the online environment for federal jobs, so national labs, science centers. And I know that Sarah Converse has already thought about that. And so we'll be busting a gut to get that to you in another few weeks. So if you listen to this and thought, oh, well, this is good, but this was not so good, please let us know that so we can innovate and make things better for you next time. So I want to respect time. I want to thank our panelists, and also thank all the postdocs for joining. We had, at the peak of attendance, 30 attendees. We have 91 postdocs in the college, so that's a pretty darn good proportion.